Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Home Tech. I'm Seth Johnson, and I'm joined by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Seth. How are you?
Well, you sound like you're doing great.
Yeah, you're never going to believe it.
Are you sick again?
Yeah, I am sick again, and it's been a really long winter here for me. But yeah, feeling a lot better. Unfortunately, the last thing that is sort of lingered and is fighting me is some sort of a cough and some voice and throat issues. So we'll battle through the episode here, but bear with me if I'm a little scratchy or have to suddenly hit mute in the middle of a coughing attack.
We'll power through, man. We'll take care of it. So
we'll get through it.
Let's dive right in. I think we had a new patron come on this week.
We did, and Tom did not leave a last name, and so I just am going to thank him by his first name, Tom. We really appreciate it. Tom came on at the $5 level, and so like we typically do, we wanted to give him a quick shout out on air. And thank him so much for his patronage and support of the show. If you're listening and you want to learn a little bit more about how you can support the podcast as well, the best way to do that is head over to HomeTech.fm/support. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support, and that's where you can learn about all the ways that you can become a patron of the show. If you enjoy what we do here and want to contribute a little, we'd really appreciate it. You can do that for as little as $1 a month, and we've had a lot of people come on board and do that, and we are very, very thankful for that. So thanks, Tom. We appreciate it.
Yep, definitely. I would like to echo the thanks as well. Thanks to everyone, and thanks to Tom this week. We really do appreciate it. Big news, Jason. Sonos. I remember when they used to release product, and now it looks like they're gearing up to do it again.
Feels like a distant memory, yeah, but it sounds like there's a play base on the horizon, and this is sort of rumors, but it seems fairly substantial, and I think there's some meat to this. It was Dave Zatz over at zatzNotFunny.com got the scoop once again. He's good at that. I'm not sure how he does it exactly, but he's got a knack for it, certainly, and this is an interesting looking product. I'm trying to figure out the thought process and what, really differentiates this from it kind of just seems like a small play bar in a way. It's a speaker essentially that sits underneath your TV, so a TV on a stand could sit on top of it. Rumored price point of about $700, tentatively expected to ship in March, and there's some speculation about what all it's going to include, of course, and we can talk about that a little bit, but this popped up momentarily, it sounds like, on BH Photos website, and was very quickly taken down, so I think somebody probably pushed that live accidentally, and of course, the internet being what it is, it got out there pretty quick. So good to see Sonos working on some new product finally, like you said, but still trying to figure this one out a little bit.
Well, I know that Bose has a very similar product to this already, and I have installed it, and surprisingly, it does actually have decent sound that comes out of it. And I know that they've had some success with that particular product. I'm trying to find the name of it.
The Bose Solo 15.
Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah, they have weird names for their stuff. So yeah, I don't mind this. This isn't bad, especially for. I mean, most people would install a TV. They're not going to install it on a wall, and if they do set it down like on a cabinet. The play bar, you can set it in front of your TV, but it's like 3 or 4 inches tall. And some of these new TVs have, less bezel, smaller stands. I imagine that the play bar would have been like approaching the bottom of that TV. So, I think this is a pretty good idea. This is a nice slim device. Definitely needed in the Sonos line, and I'm $700 is the same amount that you see from for the play bar. So with this thing, I bet it's just a play bar in a different form factor, and it'll be be able to be paired with the subwoofer and the other speakers to make surround sound. Smart move. I think it's pretty good product.
Yeah, I Variety in the chat room is saying he bets that it has a vertical woofer inside of it. That's an interesting thought. I mean, I think the form factor maybe will, who knows, but form factor will maybe lend itself to better audio quality, like you alluded to with some of the Bose products. And I know, that certainly could be a factor. I think the other thing that jumped to my mind is, I think your points were great about, bezel size, and the play bar can be fairly tall. I think the other thing is that, the play bar, to me, Although, we've installed it in a number of scenarios, just sitting on the credenza or something. But I think that product looks much better wall mounted. And I think there are a lot of, consumers out there who maybe aren't mounting their TVs. That probably represents a fairly large portion of the Sonos's target market. So maybe having a product that's a little more purpose built for that sort of installation, with the specific strengths that form factor can lend itself to, could be a nice addition to the Sonos catalog.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a home run for them. I think it'll probably be a little more popular than the Play Bar. I mean, the Play Bar is big and nice, but it's not very approachable. Like if you were to see that package, and the way it's packaged isn't for some people. So I think that this is going to be a bigger home run. People can see this; they can visually see this under their TV, and I think it's going to be a little bit more popular at the end of the day.
Yeah. Chris Gamble's in the chat room as well from Live Install, good friend of the show, and he's he mentioned Alexa as well, and sort of in a different context, but that reminds me that there is some speculation about this new product and where Sonos is going to go in terms of voice control. Will it have native voice control of some sort built into it, or is Sonos going to continue to sort of hitch their wagon to Alexa like they've kind of hinted at? So that will be another thing that will remain to be seen, and I'll be interested to see what they do there.
Activate the microphones. Everything's listening.
That's right. Well, anyways, here let's move on. We've got a number of news stories that we want to cover, and this one actually was from, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago or so, but with our ISE coverage, we just couldn't get to it last week, and it's getting a lot of attention. I've actually had a couple of different people reach out to me through email and various channels to make sure and call our attention to it, and that is the Kavo streaming box. Interesting looking product, Seth. I know we were having some dialogue about this in the Hub, which is our Slack channel, and I don't know. I think you and I may have slightly different take on this. I know you kind of, I'll let you elaborate, but sort of see it as maybe a bit of a Band-Aid product, and I don't know. I think that argument is reasonable, but I also think this product has some meat to it.
Well, there's a number of problems I have with it. It is a Band-Aid for we're not where we want to be. This product is set out to solve a problem. We're not where we want to be with streaming video. If you have an Apple TV, an Amazon, what are they called, Fire TV, you have a TiVo, you have a Blu-ray player, all of these different devices could have a mix and match assortment of different apps for each individual service. And the Apple TV is not going to have Amazon on it. And nothing is going to have Apple, other than the Apple TV is going to have Apple's products on it. So this device is kind of a glorified HDMI switcher. I would probably classify it. And it built into it, like, so here's the idea. You take this device and you plug it into your TV with an HDMI cable, and then you plug all the other HDMI stuff into it, like the Apple TV and your cable box and your dish network, whatever. You can plug everything you want into it, and it'll figure out what this stuff is that's plugged into it, and it'll use some kind of AI that figures out how the menus work, and certainly somehow be able to control the other devices that are connected up to it. They've admitted kind of a couple of little things that kind of make the hair on my back of my neck stand up, is saying that they're coy on how they are controlling things, and they kind of admitted that any one of the companies that they've integrated with could shut them down at any time for what they've done. But that all aside, this device that gets installed as a wedge device in between your TV basically makes it really easy for you to go ahead and play something on your television that you want to watch. So if you sit down and say, let's play the next episode of Stranger Things, and you go right to it, it's got a little voice control on it, and it taps right into Netflix, wherever the Netflix app is and lives. It doesn't really matter. It goes straight to the Netflix app and starts playing, and you don't have to go through all the other menus and all that other stuff and worry about where the particular program is that you want to play. That's great. I think that's awesome. But I mean, this this thing has so much going against it for mainstream adoption. Like I just don't. I mean, it's got a lot of work to do to really prove itself in the market first, especially at the like $499 price point. And
400, I think.
Is it 400? It really doesn't matter because that doesn't include all the devices that you have to plug into it. Like you still have to have those too, right? So I don't know. I'm more speculative on this, especially for all the hackiness that was kind of demoed. They've got a great video with Walt Mossberg and one of the other Verge editors on there, which they go through. They do a decent demo of it, but I would like to see this as a first party app from somebody like Apple or Google or Amazon, rather than just kind of be wedged in between.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a great job of explaining it. It's a very unique product. There's really nothing out there quite like it. Certainly not that I can think of. I don't know, a few points I want to tackle there. I think that I think your points are valid about, in the long run, there may be some trends in the market that make it difficult but that's making a big assumption, right? That app makers on TV platforms can get all the content deals and that things can start to aggregate in one place. And I think that eventually, we've talked about it, and I think eventually it will get there. I think it's still going to be a long time. And even when it does, I think there's still going to be a place for a device like this, if they can execute it as advertised, I think is the big question. The other thing that I want to point out, there's some great dialogue going on in the chat room right now as we're talking about this. And I think that, the key thing that Joey is pointing out in the chat room is that you kind of have to think about this a little bit differently than, like you said, a glorified HDMI switch. And yes, it sort of does that, but the fact that it's using this intelligence to, control the devices and allowing you to basically just say, I want to watch Game of Thrones, and it goes and essentially does the rest. You've almost got to think of it as a universal remote as well. And the other fact of the matter too is that $400 price point, as TJ is pointing out in the chat room, I think is a great point as well, is that in a sense kind of offsets an AV receiver, sort of. I actually don't know. That was one of the questions in my in my notes, and I'm sure it's probably mentioned in some of the articles somewhere. Maybe someone in the chat room can help. I'm not sure exactly how it handles audio, so how you tie this thing in with like a surround sound system is sort of a question in my mind. But I think the concept is really interesting. I think it solves a real problem. I personally don't think the $400 price point is prohibitive for their target customer. I think, the argument in one of the articles that I read was that, well, if you think about the typical customer who's going to have enough devices to even look at buying a product like this is willing to spend money on a better experience. So I think that's the argument that they're making there. And I don't know, there's some big seems to be some big names behind it. I'm not really a venture capital guy, and so I can't connect all the dots there. But it seems like a product, like I said at the outset, that's got some meat to it. Again, I think it solves a real problem. And I think you've got to think about it a little bit differently than just a glorified HDMI switcher. I think it's doing a lot more than that.
Yeah, I'm just not feeling it. I mean, I guess if I had my hands on one, saw how it really worked. Still, though, I mean, even at the $400, I know that we're going back to this, but it's $400 that somebody's going to put in on top of the devices they already have to have a better experience. As you said, if that was the case, if that was how things worked, TiVo would have a better business plan going on right now than having to sell out to Rovi. I just don't see this. I mean, who knows? I would love to come back in a year from now, after they ship their 5,000 first, the only ones in the next year, and come back next year and they're shipping 10,000 or 20,000 of these things. But I think they have a long road ahead of them, and in that road is all uphill. There is no downhill. There's no downhill for this. This could be taking this the entire product line gets completely taken out if one of these first party guys actually does what they've been wanting to do and strikes all these deals with content providers, or as they say in the article, one of the third parties shuts them down. What if Apple shuts them off and kills the integration? Or what if, whatever, boxy or something. I don't know. What if they do cut them off? Well, then they're not controlling that, and it's a $400 box that's less compelling. So I think they've got. I think it's like an interesting demo, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they're going to make it in time for all of these apps to just end up on your TV screen. I really, hand on heart, I really think that's where we're going. Like, we will have apps on the TV screen that do everything that this box does with the TV remote you get out of the box. Then why pay $400 extra and plus another $400 or $500 for all the other miscellaneous boxes and HDMI cables that you're going to need to get all the other content, when essentially in 2-3 years time, the TVs are going to have this technology anyway. So
again, I think the assumption is that the target customer's already got all of these boxes and is presumably frustrated with a user experience and a fragmented user experience, I should say. And I think you make all valid points, but I don't know. I'm still hopeful for this product.
You're more hopeful than me.
That, yeah, I am. I think it's a really neat concept. I think that, you keep alluding to mainstream, but I don't know that it necessarily has to be mainstream. Like, $300 or $400 universal remotes certainly aren't mainstream, but they've built a hugely successful business off of selling those. And so I think that, at that price point in the model that they seem to be targeting, I think they said maybe 5,000 units the first year. Make sure they get it nailed. I'm not necessarily convinced that their business model is dependent on it going mainstream. I think this is a fairly high end, that being a relative term, of course, for the integration crowd who, is used to clients maybe spending a couple $1,000s on an AV receiver, that sort of thing. I don't know. I think the $400 price point is digestible to the type of client that they're targeting. I think the videos of it look really compelling, and I'm pulling for them. So time will tell, but I think it's a really interesting product nonetheless. Obviously, one that has really got people talking and paying attention.
And it's made out of wood. I need to throw that in. I mean, it's made out of wood. Come on.
Yeah, they're going for the nice finished look. I commend them for it. It's not another black plastic box, so I think that I think that was interesting. But anyways, let's move on. We've got we've got a lot to cover. I think that we'll have to circle back to this story and see where things are at, and who knows, maybe we can get someone on the show to chat about it and learn a little bit more. So that would be cool. If you're listening and you have any commentary on that, and you want to hit us up after, and maybe you're not tuned into the live show here, let us know. HomeTech Podcast, at HomeTech Podcast on Twitter. Like I said, this is a story that clearly has people talking. I had a few different people send it over to me this week, and it's, if nothing else, Seth, you can at least admit that it's gotten people's attention.
Yep, I think it did. I mean, they're targeting a valid pain point in the market that we're in right now, where these content providers and the device manufacturers like Apple and Google and Amazon really don't have their act together. One day we would hope they would all play nicely together, but I mean, I think you can't even buy an Apple TV on Amazon. It's gotten that bad. So, it feels like it's an uphill battle either way. I just think that this is a longer road to travel. So, like you said, we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Let's move along and chat a little bit about this Vizio mess that came up last week.
Yeah, big story. This is we'll link up to the FTC website here, a little summary about it, but it starts out, consumers have bought more than 11 million internet-connected Vizio televisions since 2010, but according to a complaint filed by the FTC and the New Jersey Attorney General, consumers didn't know that while they were watching their TVs, Vizio was watching them. And gosh, this is a big story, Seth. We've been talking a lot about cybersecurity, and we've had a couple of stories that have sort of spun off of that broader topic about smart TVs, and now how we actually have to think about the security and privacy on our our televisions, which is still a relatively new idea. And this seems like a fairly egregious move by Vizio, and I'm kind of glad they got caught for this, and that hopefully it'll serve as an example. Although I think you were telling me that the fine was kind of a joke. I'll let you jump in there, but big story.
Yeah. The fine was $2.2 million, and they had installed software on 11 million consumers' TVs to do tracking without their knowledge or consent. Amazingly enough, they were tracking things like IP address, wired, wireless MAC addresses, Wi-Fi signal strength, nearby Wi-Fi access points, and they've also developed like the Shazam for video. So this is one of those things. Any device you had plugged in, like if you were watching video on your TV, it would know what that was. No matter if you were watching over the air, if you're watching something on Apple TV, if you're watching something on your cable box, it would do some kind of math is involved here. I'm sure it would do that. Pick a couple pixels off, and then match those pixels up with something in a database, and figure out, hey, they're watching The Crown here on the Netflix on the Apple TV. Let's put them down for that. And they were taking this data and selling this off to third parties, again, without consumers really knowing about it. So if your Facebook ads have gotten a lot better, you can thank your TV for it, because this is the kind of stuff that really can bring in some money for a company. And I mean, geez, $2 million just doesn't seem like enough for what they did here without any heck. They had it released on their new TVs, and then they went back and updated their old TVs to have the same feature. Just crazy ridiculous. So watch those smart TVs. They could be spying on you, I guess. Turn off auto update and turn off the spyware.
Yeah. Yep. It's really surprising. Like I said, I'm glad at least it got brought into the public eye, and even if the fine or the settlement is kind of a joke in the grand scheme of things, at least at least it'll bring some awareness to it, and hopefully other companies, if they're considering these sort of things, will reconsider. I'm not one that gets as excited about it as most, or spends as much time maybe as others thinking about privacy and the Internet of Things and that conversation. But that's certainly not to say that it's not important, and that everybody should be paying attention. And I think that this is another great example of it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, want to talk a little bit about this cool little HomeKit. How much does a HomeKit house cost article we have here from 9to5Mac. Really, really interesting. I really hadn't thought about, I should have, but I really hadn't thought about what it would take to get a home automation system, off the shelf with HomeKit hardware. And this, let's see if I can find the author. And Zach Hall here has kind of gone through, added everything up, installed some of these devices, or if not all these devices in his house, and come up with a price point for us.
Yeah, it's a really smart idea for an article. I actually was pondering this casually. I didn't get nearly as far as he did in terms of actually diving into it and figuring it out. But one of those things that has been in the back of my mind a little bit is, well, we hear all of these different products coming and they're all very low price points, but really, like, what does it take to put those together into any sort of cohesive smart home system? And so commend him for digging in and tackling this article. I think the number that he came to, $4,400 is the number I see here. So just under $5,000, which, as anybody who's either shopped around for high-end home automation system or installed or sold them knows, that is a very, very low price point. So really, really interesting. And this is an article I would encourage everybody to go check out, because I think it really serves as a good bellwether for where things are progressing. And we understand that, of course, there are fundamental differences between a HomeKit house and a fully integrated Control4 or Crestron or Savant system still, of course, but those differences are nowhere near that price point, if we're honest. So really, I think the big difference still, which is sort of a separate topic, is yes, this is DIY technology, but would love to see. I'm not sure if the article mentions how much time he invested in doing this. I think that would be an interesting metric to see, because really that's a big cost driver in getting a professionally installed system, is the highly skilled labor that you need to have there for hours and hours doing installation and programming. So I think to see the time factor on this one would be interesting, but all the same, $4,400 is a pretty compelling number.
Yeah, and just to kind of like run down a couple of things he did, he put in the Philips Hue, a couple of Philips Hue lights. He did some Lutron Caseta. He actually, this is an interesting point in the about $1,000, $930 were dedicated to Lutron Caseta, not because of the Lutron product, which only was about $760, but he had to actually upgrade his compact fluorescent lights with dimmable LEDs, and they were about $10 a bulb, which added another $260 to the price. So he actually, went through this whole thing and did quite a bit. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these. Lighting, he did Lutron and looks like a couple of Hue things. Thermostats, he's got Ecobee here. He's got a couple of wall switches, August, door locks, some fans, HomeKit device ceiling fans from Hunter. He's got a couple of motion detectors and Chamberlain HomeKit compatible garage door opener, which and a Honeywell Lyric alarm system, which was about $300. All in all, I mean, I would say this is a fairly good example of what a HomeKit house should be, and for less than $4,500, I mean, soup to nuts. I mean, you're not going to find you're just not going to find anything that the custom installers can do to come near that price point. He admitted that, like, going to putting some window shades on, he got it up over $8,000. But I can imagine asking, a custom integrator, hey, let's put some Lutron shades in and see how that price goes up. It'll be $8,000 in just labor. So, yeah, man, I gotta say, this is an interesting article, and I didn't, if you're a custom integrator, I'd encourage you to go read it and realize that everything they've done goes into an actual home automated home. Like this is something that everything gets controlled, because this is what's going to happen to the bottom and middle of the market right now. I mean, the bottom right now is getting eaten up by these little like lights and Philips Hue type devices, but this is real stuff here. This is Lutron. This is Ecobee. This is real product doing real home automation. And I got to say, this is something interesting here.
Well, and HomeKit is coming squarely at that argument that's always gone against the sort of low end of the market, which is that, well, you end up with a different app for every device in your smart home. Well, that's exactly the problem that HomeKit is solving, and without the need for you to go buy a dedicated, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 processor. It's just there, and it just works, in theory at least. Now, I don't want to talk about HomeKit as if it's all sunshine and roses. Surely, again, I would love to see the amount of time he spent on this, and I know that we hear from fans of the show that HomeKit is, it's still got some glitches and things that people are working through, but that's natural with any technology, particularly still what I would consider a relatively new initiative in the smart home, and so. Again, I think very compelling. Almost just jealous that this guy beat us to the article. I think it was a great idea, to dive in and really do that. Not that I have $4,500 sitting around to throw at HomeKit gear, but we'll need a few more patrons for that. But
HomeTech.fm/support.
Yeah. But no, I think you're right. I think this really begs the question of what is the impact on the low end and the middle of the market of these sort of initiatives? This is the real deal. This is not something that we're just speculating about like we were 3 short years ago. It's coming, and HomeKit is quietly rounding out and becoming a more product mature technology as far as the selection and types of products and manufacturers that are available there. So that's slowly and steadily happening. Obviously, you've got Google slowly trying to figure it out. Nest clearly has been slow to get there, but all that. Samsung, everybody's coming at it from a different angle, and I think this story is a perfect example of that. And where does that leave the CEDIA channel and the traditional integrator, I think, is a really, really important question. And I know we sound like a broken record sometimes because we talk about it, and that's the world that we live in. So it's very important to think about. We saw a number of stories this week that this calls to mind. Control4, the CEO, Martin Plain, there was a really great interview that he did for Residential Systems. Ted Green was the article's author. And, we're not going to hash out that article completely. It was pretty in-depth, but I think Control4's strategy is a direct response to this. Martin Plain is always beating that drum about Control4, looking at the company as an infrastructure company and not a gadget company. And he talks about the difference between a connected home and an orchestrated home. And I think these are clearly reflections of Martin, I've met briefly and strikes me as an extremely intelligent guy, looking at the market and trying to figure out how Control4 can differentiate and make sure that they stay at a level closer to the top of the market in terms of integration. So this trend is certainly playing out in a lot of different ways, and it's important to be paying attention to it.
Yeah, not only Control4, but Savant, has clearly made it known that they are not interested in going down market. They're going to be racing to the top to try and steal market away from Control4 and Crestron. And this is an interesting market we're going to be in when Control4 and Savant, which typically existed only to steal jobs away from Crestron dealers, have really come completely around, and now they have gotten so much support inside the integration channel that they're going to be attacking and moving back up to after those high end jobs. Will we come to a day when a Control4 system is as expensive as a super high end Crestron system was back in the day? Because there's no reason. I guess what I'm trying to say, because there's no reason to sell to the bottom part of the market, because the product's the entire job is taken care of by either HomeKit or Smart Things or something along those lines. I mean, this is, and what's interesting is this is happening now. Like we're watching it happen. The shot over the bow is definitely the HomeKit article, and then the a couple articles with Control4 and Savant written on them are the boats turning. I think that's happening right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that to your point, one of the specific points you made there, I think even as companies like Control4 and Savant and Crestron race to the top, as you say, I still think that my gut feeling is that they're still going to continue to try to drive prices on their products down and make the programming easier and more approachable, because they know that that's just the expectation of the market, and that's the way that technology is evolving. I think we'll just see less of the Savant's DIY remote that went into Best Buy and just didn't work out. They've pulled the plug on that essentially at this point. I think that's more or less become public news, and I think that so Bob Madonna came back and is looking at the company and saying, look, we need to focus on luxury. And I think there's a big market there, and I think there will be for the foreseeable future, and it's a market that's big enough to keep a lot of people fed, and so I'm an optimist about that market. But I think that the reality is that the middle market is where things are going to struggle more. Actually, Henry Clifford, another Residential Systems article. I'm a big fan of Henry Clifford's stuff. If you don't read him, if you're an integrator, he's great. He's got some really interesting thoughts, and he did a piece this week about 3 strategies for dealing with the dying middle market. I don't remember if he used that exact terminology, but it's a real trend that people are grappling with. We're not going out on a limb by saying that. I think that it's just something that companies are responding to clearly, like Savant and Control4, and we're seeing Crestron adapt a little bit as well in terms of making their programming easier and more approachable. We talked about that on our ISE episode. So there's a lot of different facets to this, and I think it's really fundamentally the home technology integration channel is changing, and I don't think there's going to be a dramatic overnight, flip of the light switch and all of a sudden thousands of people are out of jobs, right? It's not that kind of deal, but it's just this gradual, slow and steady evolution that's taking place, and just constantly just thinking about that and trying to figure out what it means.
Right. And it's a whittling away essentially of the bottom and now the middle of the market. I mean, we say middle of the market, but that's honestly where a lot of home technology integrators are making their money these days. I mean, whether they're pre-wiring a house and hanging a couple TVs up, and then maybe, just maybe, you get that 1-2 big jobs a year that really make for a nice get you back in the black and make for a nice year at the end of the year or quarter. Those high end jobs are few and far between, and when you have your vendors like Control4 and Savant moving their product up into that high end, you're going to start selling. You're going to start seeing these companies selling and competing for those same 1 and 2 jobs. Like, it's not going to be just you selling against those. It's going to be all the other companies in the areas are really going to be motivated to get those jobs, because all the other stuff has been whittled away to the point where either it's not profitable or they're going to need to do something. And so I don't think that it's going to be an overnight thing, like you said, but it's definitely something that's happening right now. And it's time. I mean, I think we put out this call before. I think countless articles have put out the call before, but this is happening. Like, you can see it happening right now with the articles. I mean, Amazon's got smart home consultants that go out to people's homes and actually give them decent advice. I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago when we started this podcast that Amazon would be in the smart home business? I mean,
sending smart home consultants out there.
Yeah. Crazy.
Really, really interesting. There was an article I read about that this week, and just trying to get a better feel for what that really entails. And gosh, it just, like you said, you just read it and you're like, wow, this is really I can call Amazon and they'll send somebody over here to advise me on my smart home. And like you said, who would have thought that just a couple of short years ago?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Wolf actually, on his last smart home show, I'm really having a hard time catching up on podcasts now, but he actually recorded an entire interview. The entire episode was him and the Amazon smart home associate, sitting down and chatting about what he could do in his house for technology and what. I mean, the guy sounded like he knew what he was talking about. I mean, he mentioned if this then that or whatever, and then mentioned the other one, Stringify, which. If you really don't know what you're talking about, Stringify doesn't really come up in those conversations, but he knew what he was talking about and knew how to he knew his product, just like you and I as integrators know our product. He knew his, and he knew what it could do and what the limits were and what what he could do to tailor it a sell or products for each individual client. And man, if that doesn't say where this market is heading, I don't know what does, because it was a fascinating listen. I'll put a link to it in the show notes for sure, over at HomeTech.fm/149 this week, and we'll put all these in there because I think this is something that's big that's happening, and I think as integrators we all need to be aware of what's going on right now, because this is a completely different market, and I think 2 years from now, Jason, we're going to look back and say, wow, how naive were we 4 years ago when we started this podcast?
Yeah. Well, that's quite possible. There's another, Hello Tech is another one of these, sort of like a little bit different than Amazon's model, but there's a bunch of these out there now. And this one came to mind. I pulled up the stories you were talking, because this was on CE Pro this week. I think actually cross-posted from over on Electronic House. And it was just an article talking about how a DIYer enlisted some help from Hello Tech, which is sort of like you can get technology help for hire, almost like an Uber for, smart home installations, I suppose. I don't know a ton about them, but, the stuff that she was able to do with just a little bit of help, quickly going online and hiring somebody, there's some pretty sophisticated stuff in here. Motorized lifts. I think there was lighting control, if I recall correctly. So, this is not some just rinky-dink little smart light bulb and call it a smart home thing. This was actually a fairly involved installation. Again, relatively speaking, for the high-end integrators in the audience, that's obviously a relative term, but I think all the same, it's fascinating to watch. And want to give a quick nod to a couple articles as well that we may try to include in the show notes that Chris Gamble's putting up in the chat room right now, and he's actually done, I think, a good job of digesting and giving his thoughts on this topic over at his blog, which is customize.uk. And you can go over there and click on the customize.uk.com, it looks like, and you can click on the news tab at the top. And he's got a few different articles about this evolution and what it all means. And I think his head's in the right place as far as I'm concerned, and good to read and hear what other people are thinking and how they're adapting to this market.
Absolutely. It's always we're in for some interesting times, I think. This market is changing. It's changing faster than I thought it would. 2 years ago, I think, when we sat down and talked about this, we could see this coming. We could see this on the horizon. But again, we had no idea that Apple was going to say, okay, here's a home controller on every iOS device out there. And Amazon was going to come out with a crazy little tube that you yell at and ask for, help. I mean, no one could have predicted that. And here we are, 2.5 years later, looking at how quickly the market's changing, how fast this technology that is not integrated technology. Like, you don't see iterations on technology come from Control 4 or Crestron as fast as you do from Apple and Amazon. This is all DIY product that is going to iterate and build on itself and get stronger and stronger and more compelling in the future here. And man, I honestly, I'm excited. More people having their hands on this stuff means there's more smart home automation out there. It means that the smart home will actually just be, like Chris is putting it, just home. You're not going to have to identify it as being smart. You'll just have a home.
Yeah. And I think we risk a little bit sounding like getting up on the soapbox and saying, "Oh, pay attention, this is happening," and I think that's an important message. But I think on the flip side of that coin, you're right, it is exciting. And we've got to think about the opportunities that this presents as well, because I believe there are opportunities. And we won't, we could probably do a whole episode on that and get some people on who are doing interesting things, and that could make for a really fun conversation about how people are adapting to that. But I think the general takeaway is this is great for consumers. Obviously, consumers are presented with choices and options in smart home technology that they didn't have anything even close to a few short years ago. And so what does that translate to in terms of general awareness, and how can home technology professionals take the expertise and the experience that they've built up over years or decades of doing this, and let's just get innovative and think of new, different ways to not fight against this technology, but leverage it and roll it into our business models. And I believe that there are ways to do that, and I think some of them are being discussed now and will bear fruit, and I think others we probably as an industry haven't even thought of, or they haven't even occurred to us, and they're yet to develop. So I think that there are plenty of ideas out there, and I think we just have to think creatively about what we do with them. And let's not lose sight of the fact, again, that this is exciting. This is really cool stuff that's happening in the smart home, and that's Seth, it's a big part of the reason why we get motivated to do the show every week, because this stuff is just fascinating to me. I enjoy reading about it and seeing what these companies are doing to really push this technology forward.
Yep, absolutely. It is exciting. I think that's why, you and I initially jumped into this. We were looking at this and saying, wow, this is crazy. What's going on here? Let's put a show together. And man, I thinking back on what are the conversations we had then, what we were talking about then, and then what is relevant today and what's happening today. It's just blowing my mind. I mean, it really is. I mean, this is one of those like wake up moments for me where Yeah, we may be on the soapbox a little bit for integrators, but consumers have got to be excited about the technology that they're going to get for next to nothing. I mean, really, if we sit there and think about it, some of the stuff that you can do these days is just dollar for dollar. It is the least expensive route to go, and you have a smart home. You have some smart technology in your house. Very exciting, very exciting. So
yeah, definitely. Well, it's probably a good place to wrap up. Had a great time chatting with you this week, Seth, and I think really, really fun topics, and look forward to reconnecting with you again next week. Want to reiterate what we said earlier in the show, and thank all of all of our listeners, but especially those who have taken the time and given the generous contributions over at our HomeTech.fm/support page. Truly appreciate it. Means a lot to us. And if you're listening to the show and enjoy the podcast, we would really welcome you, to go over there and check that out. So once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. Another great way to connect with us is, again, over on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast.
Yep, and I want to thank everybody who is participating in the chat room. Thanks so much. It really does add a fun little element to the show. Trying to do this live and see what everybody's saying over there. It's definitely fun. So thanks, guys. We really do appreciate it. And with that, Jason, I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good. Take care, Seth.